who's actually going to get the most out of a single-needle walking foot zigzag machine, and who would be better off putting their money toward a more basic lock-stitch unit or a full-blown industrial cabinet. Is it worth the price tag for someone who sews a few quilts a year, or does it only make sense for a small shop owner who needs to tackle heavy knits and leather on a daily basis? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When you first see the Consew 146RB, the biggest hesitation most of us feel is the "what am I really buying?" question. The machine sits in a compact cabinet that comes pre-assembled with a metal table, a walking foot, and a built-in motor. That sounds like a ready-to-go solution, but you have to ask yourself whether you'll actually use those extras or end up letting them gather dust. In my own research, I dug through a mix of forum threads, YouTube unboxings, and the handful of buyer comments that do exist. The consensus is that the machine shines when you need that extra feed power for thick layers, think denim, canvas, or multiple-ply quilting, but it can feel overkill if you're mostly stitching cotton tees and simple hems. Let's start with the people who will love this. If you run a small custom apparel business, a home-based upholstery workshop, or you're the go-to seamstress for a local theater costume shop, the walking foot is a real time saver. When you're trying to sew a pair of leather jackets or a quilt with 10 layers, the foot keeps the top and bottom fabrics moving in lockstep, preventing the usual puckering and shifting you'd see on a regular feed dog. The built-in motor means you don't have to crank the handwheel for long seams, which cuts fatigue during marathon projects. The table that arrives already assembled provides a sturdy surface for larger pieces, no need to hunt for a separate workbench. In short, the 146RB is a practical workhorse that lets you focus on design rather than fighting the machine. Now for the folks who should probably skip it. If you're a hobbyist who sews a few pillow covers a month, or you mostly do repairs on light fabrics, the walking foot's advantage is marginal. The cabinet's footprint is larger than a typical tabletop unit, so you'll need a dedicated space in a garage or spare room. That could be a deal breaker if you're limited on floor space. Also, the price point lands you in the middle of a range where you could either step down to a reliable lock-stitch machine and buy a separate walking foot, or you could stretch to a higher-end industrial model that offers more stitch varieties and faster speeds. In those cases, the 146RB sits in a gray area where you pay for features you might not fully exploit. One practical strength that shows up in real-world use is the machine's ability to handle continuous runs without overheating. Users who have run it for an hour straight on thick upholstery fabric report that the motor stays cool and the stitching stays consistent. That reliability matters when you're pulling a long piece of canvas for a tote bag or stitching together a batch of canvas aprons for a boutique. On the flip side, the machine's single-needle configuration limits you to one stitch line at a time. If you need decorative stitching or simultaneous top and bottom seams, you'll have to stop and rethread, which can interrupt workflow. Some buyers have mentioned that the zigzag width range feels a bit narrow for bold decorative work, so you're really getting a functional, not a fancy, stitcher. Another hidden trade-off is the learning curve. The walking foot is a fantastic tool, but it does require a bit of setup, adjusting pressure, thread tension, and making sure the fabric is properly aligned on the table. Newcomers who have only ever used a basic domestic machine can feel a little overwhelmed the first time they try to feed a heavy denim panel. It's not impossible to master, but there's an upfront time investment if you want to get clean, even stitches. Once you've dialed in those settings, though, the machine becomes almost self-correcting, which is why many small shop owners swear by it after the initial learning phase. From a value-for-money perspective, the cabinet's all-in-one design saves you the hassle of hunting down a separate walking foot and a sturdy work surface. Those components alone can add a few $100s to a setup, especially if you opt for heavy-duty tables. The fact that the table arrives pre-assembled also eliminates the risk of misaligned bolts that could cause wobble during high-speed stitching. However, the lack of a broader stitch library means you're essentially paying for a very focused tool. If your product line includes a lot of decorative elements, you might find yourself reaching for a second machine or a specialized embroidery unit, which would erode the cost advantage. In terms of durability, the metal cabinet and motor are built to withstand daily use, and the walking foot's rollers are replaceable, a detail that matters if you plan to keep the machine for years. Some reviewers have noted